Greetings, brave travelers, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, please make sure you hit that like button on your way out. And otherwise, tell me how I did in the comments. We're going to talk today about the Elemental Shaman Phase 2 or Tier 5 BIS list. Starting with the Helm, we're going to be getting our Cataclysm headpiece. And the reason this is because we're not going engineering, and engineering Helms are actually stronger individually. But we're not engineering. It's not happening. Anyways, for the Helm enchant, you obviously want the Glyph of Power from the Shatar reputation. That is at Revered. That is self-explanatory. There's no other enchant that's close. Chaotic Skyfire Diamond. For some reason, if you use 70 upgrades, which I definitely highly recommend, 70 upgrades claims that the Swift Starfire Diamond is better than the Chaotic Skyfire Diamond. Every sim proves that to be incorrect. Every bit of information that I've ever seen shows that the Chaotic Skyfire Diamond is just stronger. 12 spell crit and 3% increased critical strike damage is stronger than 12 spell damage. So, we're going with the Chaotic Skyfire Diamond in the Helm slot. And because we're not worried about yellow gems, we're going to go with the Rune to Living Ruby for bonus spell power. The neck piece, the Sun King's Talisman. Not an easy neck to get. I still don't have the Adornment of Souls from Karazhan, even though I've run it every week since launch. But we'll hope and pray that we get the Sun King's Talisman. Cataclysm Shoulder Guards. So this will give us our 2-piece. We do have 3-piece on the set, but that's kind of irrelevant. It's not that big of a deal. We're actually doing it for the stats. So Cataclysm Shoulder Guards, #1 BIS item. Should be one of your top priorities if you're making a That's My BIS list. This should go towards the very top. You might have a lot of competition, so if you put it #1, who knows? You might be the first up for it. Shoulder Enchant, Scryer Aldor, either one, whichever one you're going with. Thank you so much for the $1.
Follow God of Lou Els on Twitch if you haven't already. Also boobies, 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 boobies.
Thanks, Shax, for the $1 donation and the message to the YouTube channel. Onwards to to our shoulder enchant. Greater Inscription of the Orb or of Discipline. Either one, whichever one you chose, is fine. If you were blessed enough to have the shoulder enchant from Naxxramas and held on to it, great spot, but that's not realistic. So that's what we're going with because we're Scryer. Look, Brute Cloak of the Magi is still BIS. Unless you do Kazakh, which I have not done, and also I don't really intend to do, but a lot of the items from Kazakh are your BIS, but they're hard to get. They're very difficult to get, and I'm not doing that. So, to be reasonable, Brute Cloak of the Ogre Magi is BIS. And you want the Cloak Enchant Subtlety, because we crit all the time, and crits have a higher threat ratio than non-crits do. And so we are threat magnets. If you watch any of my streams, you'll see when I'm raiding, I often have to watch the threat meter because I crit a ton and I get right up next to the butts of tanks constantly. Like it's unavoidable. Even with Salvation, I'm oftentimes finding myself on top of the tanks for threat. Robe of Hateful Echoes. So we're getting rid of our Nether Strike set, which we do have. We busted our butt to get the Nether Strike set. I'm very proud of it. I feel that's the thing about Classic is that when you get an item or a set of some kind, you feel like you made a victory, like you've accomplished something, and it's rewarding and it feels great. Unlike retail, where like you replace that item over and over and over again every season, and it's just lame. The Nether Strike set is something that you can stick with for a while, so I wouldn't necessarily like overly prioritize these items above it. But you can go with the Robe of Hateful Echoes, which is slightly stronger than the Cataclysm chest piece, or you can go with the chest piece, which I may do because that 4-piece is kind of nice. The Lightning Bolt critical strikes have a chance to grant you 120 mana. The mana refund is actually genuinely nice. Like it's a good thing to have, right? So we might do this route. We'll see. But for now, we're going to go with the Cataclysm chest piece because I do want 4-piece really bad. It would be nice to have a 4-piece set bonus. So we're going to throw in our gems real quick. Done. Okay, Cataclysm chest piece. +6 to all stats is your best chest enchant. Exceptional stats is what it's called. The mats are listed down below. If you've used this website, again, I highly recommend that you do. It'll list all of the materials needed for your enchants for each set. All right, bracers. We're swapping out our Nether Strike bracers for the Mindstorm wristbands, which you get in the eye from Alar. The bracer enchant that we go with is the enchant bracer spell power. Okay, moving over to gloves. We're using the Soul Eater's hand wraps from Meg Therodon's lair. We do have these already. Thank goodness. We were first prio in our guild for it. I think a bulk of the reason why I got first prios a lot is because, first of all, I updated my prio list a lot. 1. 2, I crafted 3 of my main best pieces, right? So, like, that's 3 whole pieces that I'm not competing with anybody for. So my priorities were relatively easy to hit for that reason. So Soul Eater's hand wraps are current BIS. The alternative is the Gauntlets of the Sun King, but it doesn't have the gem slots, and that's really what you're going for here, because you can outscale these gloves because of these gem slots. So keep that in mind. You can go either or. I would recommend Soul Eater's hand wraps if your guild stops doing mags, which is quite possible because there's not a lot of items from mags that are BIS for anybody. They might just stop doing it, at which point you would want to go for the Gauntlets of the Sun King. Cataclysm, so this kind of goes back into the tier situation. The Cataclysm hand wraps, or hand grips rather, sorry, are not as strong as these gloves, specifically because of the crit. If there was a gem here, these gloves would be stronger. You don't need the spell hit, and the MP5 is not that big of a deal. So, Soul Eater's hand wraps it is. Enchant, we go enchant gloves major spell power, and then we go with our Ruined Living Rubies, 2 of them, because we're rock stars. We want all that spell power. So, Belt of Blasting for our belt slot. This is huge. However, incredibly expensive and difficult to get. So, keep that in mind as well. Not a bad alternative, but also follows a similar vein. Girdle of Ruination, difficult to get, expensive. So you could go with the Court of Screaming Terrors, but not for me, right? The Court of Screaming Terrors gives you spell hit, which you don't need, but you can gem the yellow gems with crit and balance it out. So I would go Belt of Blasting personally. That's going to be my end goal item. If nobody needs things like the Court of Screaming Terrors. So I have the benefit of already having the Nether Strike belt, and the Nether Strike belt means that I don't really have to replace it for a while. So I don't have to worry about whether or not I get the Belt of Blasting or Girdle of Ruination right away. But if you weren't privy to making yourself the Nether Strike set, you might want to consider going with a slightly easier option in the Court of Screaming Terrors. You'll just have to balance your hit around it, but that's not that big of a deal, right? So you go Belt of Blasting. I have to re-put my gems in, sorry, because I replaced the item. Okay, so this is our 4-piece item. This is our Cataclysm leggings. If you're a tailor, you can go with the Spell Strike pants, about equal DPS by themselves. The 2-piece set bonus for the Spell Strike makes it arguably stronger, but then again, you'd be losing that 4-piece option. And this goes back into what I said about Doomlord Kazakh being so strong. These are your actual BIS. They sim higher than anything else in the game. They do a frick ton of damage. They have a ton of stats on them. The leggings are insane. But it's also really hard to do Doomlord Kazakh. And then it's also really hard to get this item. So we're not worried about it. We're going with the Cataclysm leggings. We'll get 4-piece out of it. It'll be good. You want the Runic Spell Thread, obviously, and the Ruined Living Ruby, obviously. We're going to go into the Velvet Boots of the Guardian for the Serpentshrine, or from Serpentshrine Cavern, sorry. We're going to use these over what we have currently, which is Boots of Foretelling. Our Boots of Foretelling, very strong, mind you, but the spell power that you get from the Velvet Boots of the Guardian is insane. It's actually crazy how much more spell power it gives you. So it's definitely worth going with. We have put on there Cat Swiftness. This is just for the minor movement speed. You could go with Fortitude if you want to. It doesn't really matter for the boot enchant. You could get a core armor kit. You could get arcane resist. It's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. I just like the minor movement speed personally. We don't have ring enchants because we're not enchanters. If you are an enchanter, though, you could get an extra 24 spell power. With the Ring of Unrelenting Storms, which I have, it is BIS. It is the strongest ring for an elemental shaman in the game. And then second would be Ring of Endless Coils, and that comes from Lady Vash. So hopefully your guild's good at progging. Okay. We're sticking with the lightning capacitor. So that doesn't even actually show up on here if you look at 70 upgrades. Yeah, it just doesn't show up. It's 0 is what it says. It says 0 DPS. But for elemental shamans, because we crit so often, we're getting a lot of value out of the trinket. If you look at a lot of like Warcraft logs, you'll see there's like an extra elemental, or there's an extra lightning bolt charge on the DPS meters. That's coming from the lightning capacitor. You don't have to go that route. That's just what I have right now. You could go Quag's Eye if you aren't privy to any of the things up here. Eye of Mags, or Meg, is a debate in a way. They patched this in a later patch to where it doesn't proc the spell damage buff off of partial resist. So it used to proc off of partial resist, which made it incredibly strong because you'd partial resist all the time. Like when you're playing a shaman, you partial resist all the time. And this trinket has a constant uptime because there's no built-in timer to it. So it's just a very strong trinket. However, they patched it to be full resist only. And based on that, it became not the strongest, and 70 upgrades never changed it. So, Icon of the Silver Crescent is your best trinket. You can get that from badges. And the lightning capacitor. So that's it for our Elemental Shaman Phase 2, or Tier 5 BIS. You can, again, there's a couple of options. You can swap a couple of things around. But overall, this is going to be your number one set. So unbuffed, we're looking at 1,033 nature damage and 23.51% crit. However, once you have your talents in, you get 5% increased critical strike from your elemental tree, and you get 5% increased critical strike from your resto tree to bring you to a total of 33.51% unbuffed crit. Alternatively, if you want more crit, which is actually not a bad option, spell damage and crit kind of wishy-washy for elemental shamans, you can take some of the red gems that we have here for spell damage, and you can swap them around for crit. My spell hit rating is 5.47, which is actually too high. I'm not, if I look back, yeah, okay, so it's Helm and belt and legs. So that's why. Okay, so we're actually at 5.47% spell hit, which is technically too high. We only need 4% spell hit for Elemental Shaman because you get 3% from your resto tree, you get 6% from your elemental tree, and then you have your totem of wrath on top of it, which gives you another 3% to get you to a total of 16%. Haste, 0%. We're not worried about spell haste until we get to the point where we can get 4 lightning bolt, 1 chain lightning. Once we get 4 lightning bolt, chain lightning, that's our ultimate DPS rotation. And the only way to do that, I'm not positive the haste rating that you need anymore, but it's roughly around 10% haste. So that's it. Our talents. I wonder if it'll input. Let's try it. I've not done this part before, so we're going to throw in our talents real quick. So I did a Elemental Shaman quick guide. If you haven't seen that, I'll put a link on the video for you. But I also kind of changed this up a little bit. So we'll look at that too. So increase the critical strike chance of your lightning bolt and chain lightning spells by 5%. Call of Thunder is what it's called. So that's an extra 5% to our crit. Elemental Focus, obviously. So there was a debate actually in the comment section of my video where I had said in the video to put 1 point in reverberation. This is not incorrect. Both of these work. So what I usually do now though is I put 1 in improved fire Nova Totem because this is better for AoE situations or like heroic dungeons. It reduces the threat of your fire totems, which is good because oftentimes when you put a fire totem down, to AoE, it'll instantly get killed by the mobs that your tank is pulling if they don't have any threat on them. So 1 point in this or 1 point in this, it doesn't matter. It's not that big of a deal. The reduced cooldown of shocks is fine. It helps for interrupting more, and that's basically it. So I tend to put it in here just to be safe when it comes to AoE, but this is also an option. But the debate got kind of heated, and it was funny to watch, for sure. It got heated. So I've now decided to skip Stormreach a little bit. I used to insist on it, but 6 yards really isn't that much of a difference. However, on fights like Alar, it might help you out because the long range that you need for that fight is, well, it's long. You'll have ads on the back wall, and then you'll have the boss on the other side, and you'll have to be able to reach both without having to walk back and forth. So in a fight like Alar, where you need that range, Stormreach is really strong. I would consider either or, personally. But what I do right now for Phase 1 content is I go Elemental Fury, I grab my 4 in Unrelenting Storm, and then I get 5 Lightning Mastery, 3 Elemental Precision, which is the 6% spell hit I was talking about. Right there, Elemental Mastery we go into. So this is, you could go finish this, you could grab your last point in Unrelenting Storm for the extra mana regen, or what I often do is get 1 point in the Stormreach. Back down to Lightning Overload, Totem of Wrath, and then we swap over to the Resto tree. So we want Tidal Focus for mana cost reduction of our healing spells. You could also do the reduced time of Healing Wave. It's not that big of a deal, but if you do any off healing, the mana reduction is nice. Totemic Focus to reduce the mana cost for your totems, which is huge. Totemic Mastery, which gives you an increased radius to your totems, which is also huge, especially on a fight, again, like Alar, where you have ads on a back wall that you have to help with, and the boss on the other side. So going back and forth, having that extra radius on your totems means you don't have to replace them, which will save you a lot of mana and a lot of JCDs, which is actually the most crucial part. Nature's Guidance gives you that 3% hit we talked about, which is exactly what our set is built around, right? So then we get 1 point improved reincarnation. It doesn't actually matter where you go at that point. I just prefer it there. It reduces the cooldown on your Ankh, which is nice. And then instead of going restorative totems, we get our other 5% spell crit. So this is 5% more to lightning effect. Okay, so that's our elemental shaman talents. Let's see if it applied. It did apply. So it's showing that we'll have 33.51% spell crit. And that's exactly what we wanted it to show. So that's good. So this is our set. We're done. We did our Phase 2 Tier 5 Elemental Shaman BIS list. So you can go to enter this on that'smybis.com. That's where we do our loot system from in our guild. If you don't do that, well, at least this way you'll have a BIS list. I'm sure, you know, if you do a loot master situation in your guild, they'll want to see your BIS list, so you'll have to send this, but I highly recommend using 70 Upgrades. It's a great website. Again, there's a few quirks to some items like trinkets and stuff, but otherwise it's a great place to get a good template for what you're looking for in every phase. So we're going to do, with this, we're going to do every one for Phase 3, Phase 4, and Phase 5. We'll be doing a BIS list for every single one, so stay tuned for that. We are an Elemental Shaman over at twitch.tv/godofluls. We do raids Wednesdays and Thursdays in our Classic Guild, and that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that it helps you out in some way, shape, or form. Thank you to the Twitch chat for hanging out and just lurking while we were doing a YouTube video for you guys. If there's anything that you want to add to this, or maybe you have a suggestion for our BIS list that we could potentially change, feel free to drop a comment below. And otherwise, thanks for watching, and farewell.